Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Emma Kendrew. I am a geographer by education, but now I lead intelligent engineering services for Accenture technology in the UK and Ireland. And today I'm going to talk about beware the dark side of technology. Hopefully it's there. Beware the dark side of technology, but I'm actually going to talk about some examples of how we can stay on the light side of emerging tech. Now, hands up in the audience, who has a smart speaker, an Alexa or a Google Home or something similar at home? Hands up. Quite a few people. I do too, and I love my smart speaker. I love putting some music on, but actually what I love it for most is that I speak to it in the morning and I ask it to boil the kettle in the kitchen so that when I get out of bed, my kettle's already boiled for my early morning cup of coffee. My parents think it's the ultimate in laziness. I actually think it's the ultimate in luxury. So I love smart speakers and I think they have lots of convenience and positive application. But there are lots of people who are, potentially people in this audience, who are a little bit wary and potentially suspicious of this technology. And this is something that we've seen more of over the last couple of years, the idea of a techlash, a backlash against some of the emerging technologies. There have been some very high-profile examples and some very high emotional responses to some technology. But I actually think that this concept of techlash is a little bit misleading, perhaps a little bit misguided. Because at the end of the day, technology is a tool. It's not inherently good or bad. And we actually have to look at the people who are designing and building and delivering technology. So we can all come to love technology, but at the same time, we can come to hate or resent it if it doesn't do things that are good for people. Technology isn't inherently bad, but it can be turned that way. Now, hands up again. I'm big into audience participation, by the way, so hands up again. Who is familiar with or has enjoyed the Star Wars stories and films? Again, lots of people. And there's actually a Star Wars game outside that I saw that I want to have a go on later. Well, I grew up in the 1980s when feminist icons and heroines were pretty thin on the ground. But I grew up with Star Wars. I love Star Wars. And Princess Leia was a particular hero of mine. I think when we think about the dark side of technology, we're actually thinking about a Star Wars story, about the grapple between good and bad, between dark and light. And we can think of emerging technology a little bit like a young Anakin Skywalker. It's got huge potential, huge possibility. What it can do is very impressive, and yet it's not matured yet. It's not yet evolved. And it is open to suggestion. So, if our technology ends up either knowingly or unknowingly on the dark side of the force, then we could be faced with a powerful enemy, an enemy to people and an enemy to society. And there is a risk and a temptation that we could end up there. Most businesses don't knowingly end up on the dark side of technology, but there is a risk that that will happen. And engineers love experimenting with new technology. I lead a large team of engineers in Accenture in the UK, and we love to invent, we love to experiment, we love to push new technologies to their boundaries and really understand their possibilities. That's part of our DNA. And yet sometimes, in our excitement about that new technology, we don't anticipate some of the consequences of the use cases we're developing. And it's really in those unforeseen and unanticipated consequences that this risk of the dark side lies. And that might be, for example, in artificial intelligence that ends up biased because the teams that developed it were not diverse enough. Or it might be in technology that we use in our own homes or in our daily lives that actually feels a little bit sinister and creepy because perhaps it's invading our personal space and our personal privacy. So the risk is that we can become so obsessed with the power and the possibility of new technology that we don't think through all of the consequences. And we have to remind ourselves constantly about the responsibility that we have as we experiment with these technologies. That means we need to think about governance and the framework within which we develop, but much more importantly than that, we need to put people at the center and make sure we're not doing technology just for technology's sake. So when we talk about the dark and the light side of technology, we really think about making sure that trust and responsibility are synonymous with everything we're doing. And this year, as a company, we've started to think a little bit more strategically about that and what that means. And we call it the post-digital era. And that doesn't mean that digital is over, by the way. Like somebody said, wow, that happened fast. It's not that digital is over, far from it. It just means that digital is everywhere. And so what will become much more important is how technology is applied. And we believe that the businesses that will be most successful are the ones that really put people at the center of how they apply technology, whether that's applying technology for customers, for employees, or for citizens. And so I'm going to talk through some examples now of organizations and projects that are putting people firmly at the center of emerging technology. And this isn't just about companies focusing on corporate social responsibility, because we really believe that you can do tech for good that also drives profit as well. Now, very briefly, onto the technology. We believe there are 4 key technologies that are going to be critical over the next few years. And these technologies have huge potential in their own right, but it's really when you start to apply them in combination with one another that they have huge transformative potential, some of which we can't even imagine yet. And ironically, we actually call those 4 technologies the dark technologies because we love an acronym. And so the dark technologies are D, distributed ledger, the blockchain, A for AI, artificial intelligence, R for extended reality, and Q for quantum computing. And I'm not going to talk about quantum computing today. That's probably the furthest away in terms of development, but I am going to talk about some examples of the first 3. So moving swiftly on then, this is one of the first examples of applying blockchain with people at the center. Now, human displacement in the globe is at an all-time high. Nearly 1% of the global population is either an asylum seeker, internally displaced, or a refugee. And when people in war zones are fleeing persecution and have to leave their home, they have to go, they just leave. And often the last thing they are able to take with them is proof of their identity. And when they arrive at border checks in other countries in Europe and America or anywhere in the world, the first thing that they are asked for is proof of their identity. And you can see there the immediate challenge. And some of our teams came together with our partners, pulled together with partners like Microsoft to try and come up with a technology solution to that problem. And they applied the blockchain to create a solution for digital identity for displaced people. So it's a secure tool that proves their identity. We trialed it 2 years ago in the Calais jungle for asylum seekers there. And really what that means is people can manage their own identity. It's fully accessible to them, but it cannot be manipulated. And what that means is that when people present themselves at the border, they can prove their identity, they can find a new home, they can find employment, and they can start a new life. And so really when we think about the dark and the light side of technology, that seems a lot less like a dark art to me. Now, moving on then very briefly to talk about extended reality. Now, many people here will have experienced extended reality in one form or another, probably with headsets either for training or for gaming. Does that sound familiar? Well, extended reality can also be applied for good. And we're very proud of a project that we did in the UK in partnership with the National Theatre in the UK. And we worked with them to help come up with a solution for people who are hard of hearing. There are 11 million people in the UK who are hard of hearing or deaf. And when they go to the theatre or to something like this, it's a very difficult experience. So there are specific performances that are captioned, and there's a screen over on one side that has all of the subtitles. It's not as easy as just watching the television and adding the subtitles. So we worked with the National Theatre to create augmented reality headsets that are subtitle caption glasses. So now, people can go to performances at the National Theatre in London, they can go to any performance, and they can enjoy the performance in a completely new way with real-time captioning in the glasses in front of them, and it doesn't disrupt the performance. And we trialled that last year with the help of the wonderful actress Olivia Colman, and that's been really transformative. And I think it's a great example of tech for good. It's just a good thing to do. But at the same time, it's also good for business because the National Theatre now has access to and is providing a much better service for 11 million more people in the UK. So tech that is good for people is also good for profit. Moving swiftly on then to AI, and we have a couple of examples of how AI is being used in healthcare and to help elderly people live in their homes. Now, again, the popular perception of AI is often driven by what's in the press and what's in Hollywood films. We can be a little bit wary of it. It can feel a little bit sinister. But actually, AI is being applied now, today, for good. So in the US, the Symphony Post-Acute Network have used AI to look at the data of their patients to help the doctors make the right decision about when a patient should be discharged from hospital and what their treatment plan should be. And that AI is able to crunch much more data than a doctor ever could. And so the doctor always has the final say, but the AI is helping to make personalized precision recommendations for those patients. And as a result, that hospital has reduced its readmission rates for patients to below 19%. It's seen really good results. And that's not just good for the patients who go home at the right time with the right treatment plan, but it's also great for the hospital because it means that they are running more efficiently. In the UK, we're really proud of another project that we did with one of our partners, with Amazon, using their Amazon Echo and their AI technology. It's called the Elderly Care or Home Care Solution, and we created a smart assistant and a smart speaker to help elderly people live independently in their own homes for longer. That's an assistant or a companion that's there in their homes. It can help with anything from reminders about medication. It can connect them to their friends and family. And it tracks their daily routine. So as soon as there's any difference in that routine, it alerts their friends and family, and it can make sure that perhaps if there's been an issue for that elderly person living in their own home, it can quickly be addressed. So again, another example of AI and new technology being designed with people at the center. And I want to just talk about one company which I think is really interesting. They're called Bitlumens. And this is a great example of a company that is trying to change the world. You may or may not be familiar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. They are 17 areas that are creating a blueprint for peace and prosperity across the planet. And Bitlumens is a company that addresses 9 of the 17 of those goals. And they are doing that by creating solar power devices, so clean energy, and they're putting it into places that don't have a power grid. So first of all, they're creating clean energy. It's a new product, a new revenue stream that's good for the planet. Second of all, though, they connect those devices to form a microgrid so that people in those communities can trade energy and actually create their own income stream. Again, good for people. And then they are also using the blockchain, so they're combining technologies, and that means that the people using those grids can also share their data with banks, and the banks can use that data to decide whether to give them access to credit and other financial services. So I think that's a fantastic example of a company applying multiple technologies together to have an immediate positive effect. It's tech that's good for people, it's good for the planet, and it's also good for business. And just to come to a conclusion, you know, it's not just a gut feel that tech for good is good for business. Actually, we know that the opportunities for business go far beyond the kind of philanthropic things that perhaps have been confined and done slightly separately as part of corporate social responsibility. Companies who have consistently environmental, social, and governance strategy and performance ultimately deliver higher shareholder returns. So ultimately, those that are committed to tech for good are also doing good for business. And the tech industry doesn't have to be the bad guy in all of this. The tech industry can and is leading. So Amazon Web Services is just one example I'll share. They're using green technology and renewable energy to supply the energy for their cloud service. And actually 50% of AWS's energy is already being provided by clean energy sources. That's not just reducing their carbon footprint, that's not just good for the planet, but it's also opening up a possible new revenue stream and a new service because they can then resell excess energy production. So in future, we'll see much more of this. We'll see policy shifts driving more towards responsible business. We're going to see higher investment, and ultimately, that's going to raise all of our expectations in terms of what we expect businesses to do and how responsible we expect them to be in their application of tech. My time's up, but just to conclude, I think, clearly tech is not inherently good or bad. It's not inherently dark or light. It's all about how it's applied. And the lens through which tech that is good or tech that is bad will be judged is always going to be the people that are affected by it. And that's you and me and all of us in this room. So, these are just a few examples to inspire you about where people have been prioritized in the application of tech and how applying it in a responsible way is simultaneously good for people, it's good for business, and it can also be good for our planet. So as you go away, I kind of beseech you, don't be scared of or worried about technology and the dark side of technology. Let's all work together to put people at the center, make sure we make smart choices, and we stay firmly on the light side of emerging technology and make sure that it is a powerful force for good in the world. Thank you very much.